Fatherhood isn't measured in perfect moments. It's measured in ordinary ones. The rise to school, the arguments, the imperfect moments, the sacrifices nobody notices. The fathers we're discussing today won't win awards for being perfect, but they do represent something that's just as important: the reality of raising a family while carrying their own fears, flaws, and failures. These are television's most realistic fathers. The fathers that we'll be looking at in this episode today all represent a different aspect of a father. You have the imperfect father, the provider. You have the father that is leading the household. You also have a father that is like the working class dad that's trying to navigate the changes between his children and himself. And then you have the dad at the end that encompasses all of these in the one father, the one man. And the first one is our imperfect father, and that's Hal Wilkerson from Malcolm in the Middle. Hal has to deal with a very chaotic household. He's got some sons that are just always into something, and he's not the most aggressive or forceful type of man, especially not with his children. His wife, Lois, she handles a lot of it. She handles a lot, and sometimes she distances herself from what is going on in the household. So it comes time for him a lot of times to try to interject some sort of fatherly duties in the house. But when it comes to Hal, he understands he's not perfect. He understands his flaws. He embraces those flaws and those quirks. And it shows that a father doesn't always have to have the answers. You don't have to know really what to do all the time. He doesn't have to have all of them, because no one's perfect. But the fact that Hal is there, he's present. He tries to help in his ways, but he's there and he's present. And that's what matters for a father. That's what matters in the household a lot of times, that the father is there and present for his children and his wife. Now let's talk about the provider. And who most represents the provider in my list is Julius from Everybody Hates Chris. He was an excellent provider. He worked as whatever he had to do to support his family, he did it. He was a penny pitcher, though. He was very, very strict with money. And that infuriated his wife sometimes. And the kids, they always wanted things, but the father, Julius, was always very strict about where the money goes, what's going on with the money. We want to make sure the bills are paid, and he made sure that no matter what, he provided. Rarely did he complain about things, even though he had to constantly sacrifice. He rarely complained. And because he wanted to teach his children to be financially responsible, because he knew how hard it was in life. He knew how easy it could be to get overwhelmed with debt and with bills. And he tried to make sure that they didn't have that issue, that they weren't struggling or having to learn about loss, evictions, repossessions. He wanted to make sure they knew what the real meaning of the dollar was. And Julius measured every penny because he knew exactly what it cost to provide for the people he loved. raising children, especially 8 children, is difficult enough. But Tom Bradford, in 8 is Enough, he had to take care of his children after he lost his wife. And he had to deal with that grief and helping his children to navigate through the grief of losing their mother. And he did it all with class, and he still supported his children. One thing about Tom, he liked to make sure that all of his children felt seen, that none of them felt, like he was showing favoritism to any one of them. He tried to make sure that all 8 of his children all felt loved. And that's a big feat. He was not only making sure he can navigate teaching his children to go from childhood to adulthood, how to deal with not having their mother. He did all of this and worked a job and still provided for his family. He was a very, when you say a leader of a household, Tom Bradford definitely was leader of his household. He did eventually remarry, and then that's another thing that he had to kind of make sure that it was good for his children, that everything would be smooth, and he made sure he did that as well. He had to deal with so many different things outside of his control, but he always maintained order and was able to navigate through all these stressors in his life. He was very grounded, and that's what makes him a very strong father figure. And that's why his children, they were able to be well adjusted. He had a lot of compassion, and he always was he was disciplinarian. Yes, he did discipline, but he did it with compassion. And that right there is very hard for a lot of people to do. And you don't see that very often with some fathers. Tom Bradford's greatest challenge wasn't raising one child. It was making sure all 8 of his children felt seen. And he did an excellent job. So far, we've looked at fathers that may remind you of someone you know, maybe even yourself. They lose their temper, they make mistakes, they struggle to provide, but that's what makes them real. Before we continue, let me know in the comments what TV or movie dads was more like your own fathers. And be sure to, if you're enjoying this, to like and subscribe, because I'll be talking about a lot more unforgettable fathers in the weeks to come. So far, all these fathers have the fact that they're working class dads in common. And Harry Boyle was trying to be this father figure, even though he was working a lot. And typically when he came home, it was always some kind of issue going on that he had to address. And that's what we see in Wait Till Your Father Gets Home, which is a saying that we hear all the time, where a mother gets so overwhelmed and so stressed out that she just says, wait till your father gets home. And that will straighten the kids out. Well, but Harry, it was a little different, because his children were no longer children. They were teenagers. One going off to college. I think the one didn't go off to college. He kind of dropped out. He just wanted to be what Harry looked at as a slacker. And the daughter went off to college, and then she became this feminist that was always challenging Harry. So he had to kind of face the new social challenges and the cultural lines that were being drawn by his children with him. And you see this a lot in the older generations, and where the kids move on they go off to college, or they get influenced by others, and they're totally against or totally different from what their parents are. Whether their parents are conservative and the kids become more liberal, or the parents are liberal and the kids become more conservative, is something that is seen no matter what. This is seen through generations. And Harry tries to understand and accept this new generation. Now, you gotta look at when Wait Till Your Father Gets Home came out. It came out in the late 60s, early 70s, and we already know all the things that were going on in the world during that time. There was a lot of chaos and a lot of people fighting for different rights. And the generation prior to that, that was like my grandparents, they didn't understand like what my mother's generation was talking about or what they were doing, and they didn't accept sometimes what the younger generation was fighting for. That's what we kind of looked at with Wait Till Your Father Gets Home. But unlike other things, like in real life, we did see Harry try. He tried to understand what was going on. And he always wanted the best for his family, no matter what. Even if he didn't agree or didn't know how to show it, he always wanted the best for his family and for his children. And it did reflect a lot of the fathers during the 1970s. Like I said, the early 70s, very late, like 69, 70s. That's what a lot of fathers dealt with. And that's what I liked about Wait Till Your Father Gets Home, is because it showed us a time frame where fathers had to navigate, they had to kind of make a change in order to be able to really understand or communicate with their children. Some fathers love their family so deeply while carrying faults of their own. Bill Hendrickson from Big Love, that's exactly what he did. He was hardworking, he was protective, and he was devoted. But his need for control often put him at odds with the very family that he was trying to protect. Bill Hendrickson is much different from all the rest of the fathers on this list, in this episode. First off, he's taking care of 3 families, 3 households, 3 wives, 8 children, and 1 stepdaughter. Bill, his life was really complicated. It was so much more complicated than any other father that I will be discussing. I mean, out of all this whole series, he's one of the most complicated ones, because he came from a life of trauma when he was younger, leaving the polygamous family, this pretty much like a cult. And he tried so hard to be different from his father. He didn't want to be his father. He didn't want his children to deal with his father and that lifestyle. So he did leave the lifestyle. He got married. He was living a regular life with his wife until they had a scare, like they thought she was dying. And she didn't want the kids, and she didn't want Bill to actually be alone. And she went ahead and agreed for him to go back to his polygamous background to take another wife, which Bill did. So eventually he had 3 wives and, like I said, all these children. But the one thing about Bill that I can say is that he was a good father. He loved his children. He took care of all of his children. He never showed like favoritism to one wife's family, her children, over his other children. He seemed to love them all the same. They tried to treat them all the same. But Bill had major flaws. He would a lot of times withhold things from all of his wives. He withheld things from his first wife, his main wife, when he started these relationships. He held things back from his business partners, which in turn caused some major issues with his business and actually put himself and his family in danger. I look at him and I put him in this group with the other real fathers, because there's things like the fact that he was a provider. He was, even though he had the 3 wives, he was a present husband for all 3 wives. And it's the fact that a lot of men can't even handle 1 wife, and this man is handling 3. And I know that some people may not agree with big love and don't agree with the polygamy and may not like this portion of the episode. But when I was looking at real fathers and I was looking at who else I could add to this lineup, I did think of Bill. And the reason why is because I did see him as a real father, a present father, a father who wanted to provide for his children and take care of his wives. And that's what he did. And that's what real fathers do. They're present, they're there for their children, they provide for their family, no matter which way it is. Some fathers are stay-at-home dads, but they're still providing what their wife and their children need. So I'm not trying to take anything away from any fathers by saying you have to be a working father or be out of the house to be a real father. If you're present for your children and you're there helping and being a positive aspect to the household, then I look at you as a real father, as a good father. This episode was, it was fun to do, and I like looking at the different fathers and different aspects of fathers. And throughout this series, I'll be doing that. I'll be looking at the toxic fathers, the ones who ruin their kids' life. I'll be looking at what we call the good or the wholesome father, the ones that make their children feel safe, as well as finishing up my mothers, the next one, the toxic mothers, and I'll be doing also the good mothers. So I'll chronicle the good mothers along with the good fathers and the toxic moms and the toxic dads. So look for those other episodes as well. If you haven't seen my Real Mothers episode, be sure you look at that one next. And if you did see that, but you haven't seen a deep dive on a toxic father, look at my Eve's Bayou analysis of Louis Batiste. I'll see you in the next episode. And for all the fathers out there, have a happy Father's Day.